But hey, we have a very, very exciting special guest, near and dear friend to Chiddy and myself.
That's right.
Yeah, let's welcome.
Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free.
Do you believe in life after addiction? You better believe it. Now, the host of Life After Addiction.
Yes, sir. Here we are in a room full of strangers.
Hey, dude,
Talking
I
about
swear,
politics.
I knew you were going to start singing. I just had a gut feeling. I'm like, this dude's going to start singing.
Did you watch the Super Bowl last night?
I did.
My favorite part was Chris Stapleton's national anthem.
Okay.
He did a really good job, man.
So
and then you had the tears. You're not supposed to talk yet until you're introduced, guest. As you can see, we have the one camera angle, so now you know and you heard, but you don't know what voice that is. We have a very special guest, but back to the Super Bowl, as the coach of the Eagles was crying as the national, because they like his just in the Super Bowl so soon. Man, it was beautiful. It was beautiful.
I didn't see that.
Well, that's because.
But I did wager $1,000 on the Chiefs.
$1,000 disciple dollars.
1,000 disciple dollars, which is 0 human dollars.
But in heaven, God will reward you for your gambling efforts. Anyways, this is going down. But hey, we have a very, very exciting special guest, near and dear friend to Chiddy and myself.
That's right.
Yeah, let's welcome TK. How you doing, man?
I'm good. How are you, gentlemen?
Doing well, man. So TK is a marriage and family therapist. He's the clinical director of Renew Clinic Knoxville, which is an IOP, addiction recovery clinic in Knoxville. Booming. They've been open for what, a year and a half now?
Coming up on 2 years, yeah.
Coming up on 2 years, and man, awesome things. They are like a sister-brother ministry with us. They believe the same things that we believe, and it's an awesome ministry. And so we're excited. You might be asking, well, why are you having this guy on the podcast? And I'm going to let him tell you. So, TK, why don't you jump in, man? Why don't you tell us and our viewers a little bit about you, your story, what's going on? And man, it's really good to have you. We've been trying to schedule this for a minute,
Dude,
man.
it's been
Since
3 years, I think. 2-3 years in the making.
And our schedules just wouldn't come together. But, man, I'm really excited about this and have been.
Amen.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here, too. And Adam, Cheddar, you know I absolutely love what you guys are doing at S2L. And having been an alumni myself, I can speak just to the power of your program and what the Lord is doing at S2L. It's unbelievable. And Cheddar, I got to say, it's so good to see you sitting there. You were, I'm serious, man. You were, I think you'd been there 7 months when I finally arrived in my grand entrance at S2L. Is that right?
I'm not sure. When did you get here? All my time runs together. I've been here.
Oh, no. You would ask me that.
Like what year? 2018, 2019?
I think it was the beginning of 2019.
Okay, so I had just become staff.
Yes.
Cut to a clip right now of TK in 2019.
And I
Perfect intro. All right, we're back.
And I'll get to a story about my first night showing up at S2L and meeting Chester. We'll get to that though. But anyway, hey, thank you for having me on. I appreciate the introduction. Yes, I'm a counselor. I am also in recovery. Actually just celebrated 4 years on January 27th. So
Wow,
Boom.
praise God.
yeah, praise God.
Praise
That's it,
God.
man. He does get the glory for this. But yeah, I'm excited to be here. I was telling you guys before the show started, I actually realized I haven't told my story sort of start to now. I won't say finish because it's still being written. But I have yet to do that. It's always been told sort of in bits and pieces here and there, whether it's, doing group therapy or something else for Renew Clinic. So kind of thinking through this last night, it drummed up a lot of stuff for me. But it's really good to reflect on kind of where I've come from and where I've been, and to see where the Lord has brought me today. We talk about God's heart for us being redemption and restoration, and things I'd like to ask people is, if you look back at your story, what would it look like for God to redeem the broken parts of it? And so walking through this and getting to do this, I get to see that again, and be reminded that, man, he's been at work even when I was in the gutter. And that's so cool. So yeah, I'll jump in. I was born in Knoxville, Tennessee. Go Vols.
Go Vols, baby. Boy, go Vols in your face.
Jorian, cut that part.
No, leave it.
So my parents, man, they fought a lot when I was growing up, but this is not like a story of, blame the parents. I really do believe that everyone is always doing the very best that they can in any given moment. And I know my parents did the very best that they could with what they knew. But they fought a lot growing up. They divorced when I was 9. And that divorce was really, man, it was the first thing that really rattled any understanding I had of the world. And it was messy. My parents did not do a great job at keeping me out of it. But even in all of that, I don't think I've ever questioned once my parents' love for me, their heart for me, their heart for me to do well. I never questioned that. So, but yeah, we're all doing the very best that we can at any given point in time. But that divorce when I was 9, that really began the beginning of a narrative that I didn't fit in, that I was too sensitive, that my problems are uniquely different than everyone else's and no one could understand. And a big one in that too was all good things have to come to an end. And the reason I think that that's important is we all desire to tell a story about ourselves, to ourselves, and to the world. Whether we realize that or not, we are always telling a story, just kind of about who I am, my place in this world, how I experience myself in this world. And so that time period for me is when this victim narrative began. And obviously I'm 9. I didn't know that at the time, but that's where it started. And so naturally, a progression of that, I became a kid that was begging for attention. And up until about the age of 14, I garnered that through baseball, golf, good grades. I was a pretty good kid. And then when I was 14, I don't remember what year that was. It was a long time ago. But I tried my first sip of alcohol at a party that my dad was throwing. It was some kind of shindig. And I remembered feeling happy. That's really all I remember about that moment. But I remembered feeling happy. And like I had the courage to talk to anyone there. And you guys have heard that a million times,
Sure.
like liquid courage.
Yeah, liquid courage.
But that really was my first experience of it. And so I drank from like 14 to 16, any opportunity I could. Smoked weed when I was 15. And so my sophomore year of high school, obviously having discovered alcohol, marijuana, my attention slipped away from academics, sports, and it transitioned to girls and partying. And I think I had finally felt like I'd found a place that I fit in. And it felt easy, right? Like I didn't have to work at it. I knew that if I got drunk or did this or did that, it was going to be fun. And it was for a while. So my junior year, I got kicked out of the school I was going to, and my parents sent me to this boot camp program in Old Fort, North Carolina, called Seuss of the Carolinas, and I do think that they do a wonderful job. But that experience, it rattled a few other things in me. My parents immediately sent me to boarding school right after, and it felt like they didn't want me. Now the truth of that is, they didn't like me at that point in time. They loved me. I don't question that, but they didn't like me. I was not an easy kid. I was incredibly rebellious. I did not want to listen to anyone except myself. So yeah, I wasn't an easy kid to parent. And now being a parent of 3 boys, one of which who now has opinions, and I don't always like them. I'm starting to see that a little bit differently. But anyway, so I went to boarding school. played baseball there, and then I got kicked out at the very end of my first year. Long story, but basically I broke all the rules that you can break. I broke them in about 6 months. And so I moved back to Knoxville, and I go to Farragut High School. I'm at Farragut for a couple months, and I decide to run away from home because my mom would not let me follow Widespread Panic, because that's what I really needed at that time, was to go tour with Widespread Panic. So I ran away from home, and a few weeks after that, I was sitting in chemistry class. The police come in, they pull me out. You may have been surprised to hear I was still going to class when I ran away from home, but I was still going to school, crashing on friends' couches. Anyway, the police walk in, like, hey, you're coming with us. I had some marijuana in my pocket. That's not why they came to get me. They came to get me because I'd run away from home. So I spent a week in juvenile. I get out of jail, and my parents helped me get an apartment, and they let me keep my vehicle, and basically said, you obviously can't live with your mother. You can't live with me. My dad said this. You can't live with me. Here's an apartment. We'll help you for a little bit. Get a job. Get your GED. Go to college. And so that was a disaster. I was not ready for that level of independence. Even though that's what I was screaming for, right? That's what I thought I needed. I was not ready for that. Naturally, being a senior in high school, my apartment became just an absolute mess. And while I was in that's when I was introduced to cocaine, psychedelics, you name it, it was there. And so there's a period of 4 years here from about 18 to 22. That's really where my addiction just exploded. I was introduced to opiates. I got hurt playing backyard football. I went through a glass door, severed my radial artery, some nerves, tendons, and I had a few hand surgeries. As a result of that, I got put on a lot of opiates. This was back in the early 2000s when they were just, writing them like candy.
Yeah.
Again, looking back on that period of 4 years, now I see a young man that was incredibly lonely. Even though I had, tons of friends and I always had people over, I was incredibly lonely and sad. I remember now that I could not be at my apartment by myself. I always had to be with people. And so if there wasn't anybody at my apartment that night, I was staying somewhere else. And this went on for 4 years. So chronically lonely, right? Still really struggling with those beliefs that I had developed when I was a kid of not fitting in, nobody wants me, yada, yada, yada. Victim, right? And I think it's important to understand that I really was a victim to my circumstances. I wasn't the one doing anything. Things were just happening to me. Life's happening and I don't have control over it. So yeah, can't hold a job. I bounced in and out of jobs for that period of 4 years. And then when I was 22, family basically has an intervention. They send me down to Florida to where I embark on like a series of treatment centers for about a year. And so I end up getting arrested. So this is my second time. Well, no. This was probably my fourth or fifth time getting arrested. This time I got arrested for something a little more serious. It was grand theft, or theft over 1,000. So I got arrested. I spent 76 days in county jail. And while I was in the county jail, that was my first experience of being suicidal, just not wanting to live anymore. And because of that, I got put on the mental health unit in the jail. And while I was there, even though I was only suicidal for a couple days, but while I was there, I became really intrigued by mental health, kind of intrigued by my own experience and how I could like feel all these things at one time. it didn't make sense to me. Like, it literally hurt to have emotions while I was in jail. It was a bizarre experience. But I also saw how the guards were treating some of these other inmates that clearly, I didn't know then, but clearly had schizophrenia or other, severe mental health disorders. And I saw how the guards treated them, and I remember feeling just kind of disgusted by that. So anyway, I get out of jail, go to another treatment center. This time something's finally shifting. And I think it's more, I was so terrified of failing. I didn't want to have to do this again. So I go to another treatment center down there. I get a job at an Applebee's, and I enroll in some night classes at Indian River State College. And I did that for about 6 months. And in that 6-month time period, I got a promotion at work. And I made A's in my first 2 classes going back to college. And I felt I had some confidence. Something was changing, something was shifting. And as a result of that, my family kind of started pulling me back into them, wanting me around. My aunt and uncle lived in Beaufort, South Carolina. And so I moved up to South Carolina to go to school at the university, USC, where I would later graduate with a bachelor's degree. But while I was there, I worked and I threw myself into school head first. I remember taking 18 hours a semester and working full time, which in retrospect, that was crazy. But again, I think I was still just really broken, and trying to distract myself from the things that were going on internally. I managed to maintain some sobriety. I had relapses, but they were brief. So long story short, I finished school at USC, and I actually graduated at the top of my class, which shocked me.
Wow. Wow.
And I felt like it probably shocked everyone else. But yeah, I finished with a 4.0, graduated at the top of my class. I actually won the student of the year award at USC. And
Wow.
so really, really proud of myself. And for the first time in my life, I felt like other people were proud of me too. And so this is when I decided to go to graduate school. And this is really where I began the journey of the more I know, then maybe I can fix myself. Or if I'm able to fix other people, then maybe I can fix myself. So I went to graduate school for a master's in clinical mental health at Johnson University. Again, some small isolated relapses through there. They were starting to get a little bit longer towards the end of graduate school. The relapses were. But I finished school, took a job in Crossville, Tennessee, and I moved there with my soon-to-be wife. And it was a great
As a
job,
counselor,
man.
you took a job as a counselor?
So excited. Good job. Was working with primary care physician's office. Just couldn't be happier. Even though there was a professor in my life when I finished at Johnson that said, "Hey, I don't think you're ready for this yet. I think you should stay in Knoxville, get a job at an agency, and then eventually do private practice," because that's really what this was. I didn't listen, took the job up there, and things went really well for a little while. And I don't think I really realized how isolated Claire, it's my wife at the time, how isolated we really were from any kind of support system. And really at that time, I didn't think I needed one. I can do it on my own. I've been doing it on my own, self-reliance, and so we did that. And a year into it, there was a series of things that happened, like bam, bam, bam. So she had gotten pregnant, and we lost our daughter, and she was about 5.5 months pregnant. And it was a shock, absolute shock. And then 2 months later, the physician that I was working with got into some trouble. And I won't go into all of that, but essentially her getting in trouble, my practice goes up in flames. And I don't really know what to do. And she's in nursing school right now, and we have bills to pay. And then almost immediately after that, my grandfather passed away. And my grandfather, I mean, he was just as much my dad. I think at some points in my life, probably more a father than my own was. And that was sudden, that was unexpected, and that was rough. So again, no support, incredibly isolated. Our marriage begins to crumble. And this was the big one. This was the relapse that, ended it all, or at least that's what I thought. Claire was 5 months pregnant again at the time that I relapsed, which is interesting because that's exactly how far along she was when we lost the first baby. And I was only a few months away from getting my LMFT license in Tennessee, and start to finish, that's a process that graduate school to finishing takes about 5 to 6 years. And once you finish graduate school, you only have a 3-year gap to get all your post supervision in, or you have to start your supervision over. So I was only a couple months away from that. And man, this relapse, I fell so hard and so fast, and I did things that I never thought I would do. I did meth for the first time, and I didn't just do meth. I went straight to the needle, head first, meth, heroin, Opanas, the whole 9 yards. And within about a period of 7 months, completely destroyed everything that was at that point. My son, Tucker, he was born February 1st, 2018. I'm still using at this time. Sorry, so the relapse happened in August of 2017. My son is born February 1st, and then February 17th, I get arrested. And this time it's pretty serious. I got arrested for manufacturing and distribution, and an introduction into a penal facility. So a couple of pretty big felonies. I get out of there. You would think that would be enough to make me stop. It wasn't. I kept using for another month or so, living in hotels. Now my wife at the time, she had taken my son and was staying at her mother's house, which that was the right thing to do. I was off the rails. So continued to use for about another month, and then it was, hey, court-ordered treatment for 90 days. When you finish that, we'll kind of talk about what happens with your charges. So I did that. I went to a treatment center down in Georgia, and then came and did a couple months in the impaired professionals program at Cornerstone. And I really, truly, I mean this, I wanted to be done. I really wanted to be done. But I felt like such a massive failure. And here's the victim narrative coming back full force, right? Like, no matter how hard you work, things are always going to fall apart. And just that belief, man, just running over and over and over in my head. So I put a few months of sobriety together, and then August 2018, relapsed on heroin. And it was actually my first overdose ever. Claire, my wife, found me down in the bathroom. Of course, I don't really remember any of this. I do remember as I was using, I knew it was too much. And I remember thinking, so this is what it's like to die. So anyway, I woke up in the hospital, and she's mad. And she basically says, I'm leaving. I can't do this anymore. And so we kind of went through this back and forth. She's leaving, she's staying for about a week. I come home, I agree to go on Vivitrol injections, and she says, okay, I'll give you another chance. And so we're back home, we're living together, spending time with my son, spending time with her. Had started to stick my foot in the door at church. And I had become friends with a pastor. His name's Chuck Hooten. Amazing guy. And he was really supportive of me during that this is a short period of time. He was really supportive of me. And I looked up to him. And my brother-in-law, Corey Mayfield, he's an associate pastor at Shoreline Church. Started talking with him a little bit. But I still wasn't done. So January of 2019, Claire was working at UT Hospital, and our son was at his grandmother's house that night. And I bought some meth because I knew that she wouldn't be home till the next day. And then I needed to come down off of it. And so I bought some heroin. And I remember, after waking up, I did not remember this for months. But I remember now that night before I did a line of heroin, I remember crying out, begging God to take this. I did not want to do it anymore. And I was tired of hurting everyone, burning every bridge that you could possibly burn. I was tired of the pain I was causing those around me. I woke up a week later in Park West Hospital, really disoriented. I didn't understand what had happened. Took about a day for me to kind of come back around and understand the gravity of the situation. And that's when I learned from the doctor there. When EMS had found me, so my wife came home from work at 7 o'clock the next morning. I don't remember anything after 11 p.m. So we think that's around the time that it happened. Told me that when EMS arrived, that my heart rate was 7 and my respiratory rate was 2 breaths per minute and my core body temperature was 83 degrees. Typically there's no coming back from that. There's not any coming back from that usually. The doctor, man, I'll never forget, he looked me dead in the eye and he said, I don't know why you're still here, but it's a miracle. Yeah. And a couple hours after that, Chuck and Corey and another guy from Shoreline came to the hospital, and I just broke. I became a believer that day, and that day changed everything for me. But I tell people this all the time, so I became a believer. God saved me from death, but he didn't save me from the pain that was about to follow. So while I was still in the hospital recovering, I found out that I was going to have to go to a long-term treatment center, or else I was looking at going to prison. And my wife, Claire, she wouldn't answer the phone, didn't want to talk to me. Apparently, she had stayed at the hospital and held my hand basically for days. And as soon as I woke up, she left. And I didn't understand that at the time. I didn't understand that at the time. I get it now. Anyway, I'm rambling. So wake up, hospital, find out I have to go to treatment, and you need to find somewhere to go for a year. And so trying to figure out where I'm going to go for a year and still be able to see my son and spend time with him and work on my marriage felt impossible. And then Corey, my brother-in-law, the pastor, told me about Spring to Life. And we started talking with Ron, and it was sort of an impossible situation. And the Lord just moved mountains for me to be there. And a week after getting out of the hospital, my brother-in-law drove me to good old Woodbury, Tennessee, and pulled up into S2L, and I was greeted by Chiddister. He carried my bags in for me. He sat and he talked to me, and he took a really genuine interest in what was going on with me, and kind of my story and how I'd gotten there. And, at that time, I didn't really know my story that well, but I do remember Chiddister just being so genuine and compassionate. And I could tell that he had walked a very similar road. So that night, after they're done checking me in and going through my bags, we walk out to go over to the house, and Chiddister looks at my brother-in-law and says, "Hey, you care if we just pray over him real quick?" And then he looked at me and he said, "You care if we pray over you. And I was like, no, that's cool. And so we bowed our heads. He put his hand on my shoulder. That was the first time I ever experienced anyone laying hands on me. And he said this prayer that was just bold and powerful, and it felt mighty, and it had authority. And I remember thinking, he's crazy. Like, there's something wrong with this guy.
He is crazy.
Hindsight's 2020, but I look back on that now, and it's just because he believes the same thing that I do. And we do have authority in the spiritual realm when we pray. And man, he was casting that on me. So the next 4 months, total agony. I don't think I ever told anyone this
TK,
while I was
can you hear me?
Hey,
I think right now we earlier we went we showed a 2-second clip just to show what you look like, but man, we do have recorded of where you are mentally and emotionally in this moment. Can we play that right now? You know what I'm talking about, just like a minute or so clip. Can we play that right now just to show everyone this is where he was at in this moment of his story? This is where he was feeling. This is what God was doing. Let's play that for a second and then come back and finish it.
My identity began to crumble when my marriage and my career, those things that I had built around me, began to crumble. When that happened, I took a plunge back into my addiction, and that was in August of 2017. And I fell really hard, really fast, and within 7 or 8 months, almost completely destroyed my life. I kept going, and all the way into an overdose that landed me on life support for 5 days. It's still a tough one. That was the darkest moment of my life. Was coming out of that coma. And just seeing what it did to everyone around me. Words can't express the remorse that comes with that, the regret. What this program has taught me is that if I wake up every day and I follow Christ, I stay plugged into a church, I keep good fellowship around me, good godly people around me, I stay in the Word, and I pray daily that addict is dead. He's not here anymore. And that's freedom.
So that was just a video that we just saw of, I don't remember how long you had been here, man, but we were doing a banquet and we recorded a whole bunch of testimonies, but yours was so powerful, we actually cut it out just to be you. And so what you guys saw was TK 4 years ago, in one of the darkest seasons of his life, but he started to taste true freedom and the love of Christ for the first time in his life. And it was an amazing moment. And so carry on, sir. Sorry.
No,
sure
no, you're good. Yeah,
so
I had been at S2L, I think, at that point for about 9 months. And you're right. At that point, I had tasted freedom. And I can smile about it now. But yeah, when I first got to S2L, man, those first 4 months, I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know if my wife was going to leave me. I didn't know if I was going to prison. I didn't know if I'd ever be a therapist again. And so, kind of in retrospect, looking back at that, realizing how much of my identity, it was made up in, these external things. It wasn't made up in who God says I am. Right. So yeah, it was a horrible 4 months, but looking back on it, I wasn't ever alone. And I was listening to the sermons. I was reading my Bible. Cause man, I was in such a place of desperation. And I believed at that point, like something is calling me out. Something is saying, hey, you're worth it. Hey, I've got a plan for you. And I really wanted to believe that. And so I began to. Ron Anderson, one thing he kept asking me every time we would meet, he'd go, hey, you done yet? And I'd be like, well, yeah, I'm done. He goes, I don't know if it's hurt bad enough for you. Like, I don't know how much more it can hurt, but I think it's hurt bad enough. And that always stuck out to me. I'll never forget that. So anyway, fast forward, I've been there 4 months at this point, and Chittister came up to me one evening in the dinner line. I was about to make my plate, and he said, "Bro, I want you to go last. You're always the first one in line. Go last." And I looked at him like, I thought he was joking at first. And so I stayed in line. He was like, "No, I'm being serious." I got so mad. I didn't understand what he was talking about. I didn't get it. I thought it was stupid. And then a couple days later, we're going to the gym, and Chittister drove the gym van often. And I get in. He says, "Hey, I want you to sit in the back." I was like, "I'm the first one here. Why?" He said, "Just sit in the back." And so I did that for a little while. I think it was probably a couple weeks after that. I don't know if you guys remember, but the road out front at S2L, I would often go out there and just kind of pace back and forth. Y'all remember that?
Yeah. The old track.
Briefly.
Yeah.
Briefly, yeah.
There's been many who have done that.
Yeah.
This was a while ago. So yeah, I was out on the street pacing back and forth, and for some reason, 1 Corinthians 15:9 pops in my head, and I don't even know what it is. It's just that pops in my head. So I walk back into the house, go in the basement, and I get my Bible and I open it up and I'm reading it, and I read it again and I read it again. Don't even deserve to be called an apostle, and then I just broke. And it was this moment of God speaking to me and showing me how selfish, how arrogant, how self-centered I had been. And this was the first day, like the deconstruction of that narrative began to happen. I mean, here we have Paul, right? Like the greatest crusader for Christ, saying, "I don't even deserve to be called an apostle." And that is the humility that was missing in my life. And I began to realize the value of servanthood. And Chittister, I don't know if that would have ever happened if you didn't make me sit in the back of the bus. So thank you. But in
Praise
that, like
God.
there was another grieving that had to, like, it took place looking over the story that was my life up to that point, and truly how selfish I had been. And this is when I began to confront the lies, the beliefs that I held about myself. And then I had another moment at Catapult. Adam, man, he used to say a lot, like this even if moments. When you make the decision that even if I lose my wife, even if you take my kids, even if I have to go to prison, God, I'm still going to love you. And I had heard you talk about that a couple times already. But this one night at Catapult, I heard it and I broke and I just cried. And I made that pledge, God, even if I have to go to prison, I'm going to love you. I'm going to follow you. Even if my wife divorces me, I'm going to love you. I'm going to follow you. And it was in that surrender, man, just, gosh, changed everything. Relinquished control of the lunch line, the dinner line, the gym van, my thoughts, what I thought I needed for my future, all this stuff, man, just letting it go. And that's when I started to believe the promises of God, right? So like the promise of salvation in Romans, the promise of freedom from sin in 1 Corinthians, the promise of his provision in Matthew 6, like believing those things, believing that God is going to provide for me, and he is going to take care of me. That whole narrative changes, man.
It was no longer foxhole prayers that you were saying, God, get me out of this and I'll do this. It was, God, even if you do, even if this happens, amen.
100%.
That's awesome.
And starting to believe like I'm made perfect in his image, and he has called me, he has chosen me, he has plucked me out and predestined me for adoption. Like, just sit with that. Like, really, I get excited talking about it now. I still don't know.
That's the promo, baby.
What'd you say?
I said, that's the promo right there, baby.
I'm just saying, like, I think I was starting to realize the weight of it. Like, you know, the further I get in my walk, man, the heavier and heavier it is, because it's amazing. And for the first time in my life, I didn't need anybody else to tell me anything about me. Right? Like it was what's in the word? What does Christ say about me? And taking stop taking him off the cross and believing that the deadly work he can do in everyone else, he can also do that in me. So, we talk about in therapy a lot, the transformative power of narrative, right? The power of story. You think about the creation account, right? Like God spoke, God breathed, and the world came into existence. In the same way, the words that we speak power into our life. If I believe that I am not worthy, if I believe that I'm not good enough, if I believe that I'm not wanted, well, how am I going to show up in relationships? That's exactly how I'm going to show up. I'm going to behave in a way that makes you not want me. I'm going to do and act and say things so that I get to be right. There's this self-serving piece to that too, right? I get to be right. I told you, you're just like everyone else. You're just going to walk away and you're just going to leave. And then I get to be right. But who am I hurting? So anyway, yeah,
That's good.
and I think beginning to recognize at that point in time that my emotions were not facts in any way, shape, or form, and that in fact my emotions really, they lied to me often, and being able to step back, challenge my emotions with facts, submit them through the lens of Scripture, and really begin to regulate my emotions, allowing the Spirit to regulate my emotions. I don't have to do that anymore by clicking here, taking this, drinking that. Like the Holy Spirit that lives in me can regulate my emotions. I don't need anything external. Yeah, and like working in this industry now, like what I want so desperately for everyone to see when they look at their story, is what it would look like for God to redeem the broken parts of it, because He does and He will. But you got to get out of His way. I had to get out of His way. Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, I saw that transition for you. So for most people, you touched on it briefly, but TK was with us for a full year, and as you know, most people are with us for like 42 days to 84 days.
I was the
So
mascot at that point.
TK was with us for a long time, but this man was as broken as you could possibly be when he got here. I mean, he was depressed as you could possibly be. Every single day I saw him seemed like the worst day of his life for the first several months of being there.
Yep.
And I'd have conversations with him. We'd pray together, and then I'd see him the next day, and it would just look the same. But I think it's kind of like you touched on it. It was that control. And it's the fact that you had no control. And whenever you decided to relinquish that and acknowledge, like, hey, there's nothing I can do to get myself out of this. There's almost a peace that comes with that. There's almost a comfort that comes with that, knowing that, okay, I can't do anything but submit and to surrender, not only to God, but to the men that He's placed in my life. And I have to find a way to trust what they're telling me, because I desire freedom. God has set me down for the sole purpose of knowing Him more, and He's placed men in my life who can speak life into the dead parts of my life.
Yes.
And so learning to receive those words of life is critical for a man who desires freedom. Yeah. I appreciate you saying that those words I spoke to you were encouraging to you, because those words were spoken to me, and they're a big deal, and they don't seem like they're influencing or impacting my life, whether it's being first in this line or being first, when you go to the van, or man, it's so significant. Like how you steward the small things, how you do the small things in life is inevitably how you do the greater things. Yeah. So if my posture is selfish with small things, it's indefinitely going to be selfish in greater things.
And we never truly know. I was just going to say, we never truly know from moment to moment the power of our presence in someone else's life. It's I go back to those 4 months where every day was the next worst day of my life, literally, and you're 100% spot on with that. But looking back, realizing that I wasn't alone. We talk about the creation account in Genesis, God makes man and he says, oh, this is good. This is really good, but it's not good for man to be alone. And as I go back and like tease out my story as a whole, I see how isolated I was from everyone and everything. And a lot of that was my own doing. But addiction and a sense of community can't live together. Addiction lives with isolation, right? What's the enemy's, the oldest war tactic? Divide and conquer. If I can isolate this man, if I can isolate you, you're done. You're done. We crave connection. We crave having a sense of community. And if we don't have a sense of community, look, I mean, we are designed to bond to people. And if we are not bonding to people, we will bond to something, period. Whether that's substances, whether that's sex, pornography, anything, we're going to find something to bond to. We're created to do that. And we're created to worship. Flesh, idolatry. My flesh wants me to worship false idols all the time, and I have to put that to sleep.
Speaking of worship, you are a very good worship leader too, by the way, huh? Some of your gifts and talents. But I think for the people listening, like many of us, myself, Chiddy, Jorian, and I think a lot of people listening, what I noticed and can recall with you is, and I think what you both have hinted at, was that you found comfort, and maybe it was punitive or maybe it was just woe is me or whatever it is. You found comfort in the pit of despair. That's where you were safe. And you decorated the pit. That was your home. And I think the listeners, if this is you, understand that what he's talking about now is climbing out of that pit and everything changing. And I really want you to, man, as we close out here, we're coming at the end of our time, I really want you to touch on, because you mentioned in your story, God redeeming things, you climbing out of the pit, we're at this amazing moment. What has God done in your life since you left S2L? I mean, I know, but I don't want to tell your stuff, you know. But I mean, you climbed out of the pit, you looked down, and you said, that's not my home. Enemy, you're a liar. I'm a bloodstained child of the kingdom. I'm not this, what you say. I'm what he says, as you mentioned. Then what happened in your life? Like, let's hear that. Let's close with that, baby.
Yeah, man. So after kind of where I'm at now, it is still mind blowing to me, kind of what's happened to my life. I ended up meeting a beautiful woman through a brother at S2L. It's his sister. It's kind of a funny story. But I was finishing, I'd been at S2L for like a year and went on a date with her afterwards. And
and things were over. His wife, we didn't mention your wife did leave and divorce you, and it's not
yes,
like you were,
she did divorce me, which hurt. But at that point in time, even if it did not hurt as much as those first 4 months. So anyway, I graduate S2L. I meet my lovely wife today. I come back to Knoxville and I get really plugged in with the church community at Christ Covenant Church. Seth Hammond, Dr. Jim Cofield, they are my pastors. I also consider them dear friends. So I'm working, doing construction at home. I have these relationships here, and I've got relationships at Shoreline Church. And then this idea for a place called Renew Clinic gets birthed. I did not birth it. This was part of the Knox County Church Network. And Jim Cofield, Dr. Cofield, was a part of that. And Henry Bieber, the counseling pastor at Shoreline. And God, like, intricately weaving these relationships together, they called me and said, hey, why don't you come sit in with us and help us write the curriculum? I was like, yeah, I'd love to do that. And so I did that, and I worked on that with them for about 7 or 8 months. And then it was, well, hey, we'd like for you to be a counselor at Renew. I was like, I don't know if I want to do that or not. And so I started praying, because I was doing pretty well with construction. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to go back into doing therapy. And so I prayed. I was like, God, slam this door shut if that is not where you want me. Please just make it clear as day. And he did. Found out some things happened with my business partner in the construction business about a week later. I was like, okay, Lord, I'm going to Renew. At this time, I'm married, and Renew starts. We have a baby. His name is Jude. He's about 18 months old now. So all long story short, Tucker, who he is now 5, that was from my previous marriage. I have partial custody of him now. I get him. It's closer to 1/3 custody, so it's more than every other weekend, which I never thought would happen. I had to have supervised visitation for 2 years. So I never thought that would happen. So I have custody of Tucker. We have our 18-month-old son. His name is Jude. He is beautiful. And then we have a 10-year-old. So I adopted Brooke's son from a previous relationship that she had. So now married, 3 kids, helping Sarah Keel run a treatment center. And I actually just started a private practice at Christ Covenant Church with Dr. Cofield.
Watch out now.
So,
Watch out now.
Yeah.
Watch out now.
So it's
Praise God,
amazing,
man.
and it's exciting.
I'm
It's
getting
amazing,
emotional, dude.
and I'm just completely humbled. Even just sharing with you today, I think every time I look back at my story, I realize just how broken I really was, and the miracle that God worked in my life to get me to a place where I get to share my testimony. And you two played a pivotal role in this, and thank you.
Praise God. Praise God. From the pit of despair to the self-proclaimed in the gutter, broken, darkest season of his life, to a clinical director, married to the woman of his dreams, and the best dad in the world. That's life after addiction, and you better believe it, baby.
Come
Let's
on.
go.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Life After Addiction. Life After Addiction is a production of S2L Studio. For more Christ-centered addiction recovery resources, please visit s2l.net. That's S2L.net. For more information about S2L's licensed and accredited residential program, please visit s2lrecovery.org. That's S2L recovery.org.